From Isolation Studios, it's Richard Crouse.
Welcome everybody to In Isolation With, the talk show where we make a connection without actually making contact. I'm Richard Crouse, and I hope you're staying healthy and that you're staying happy. My guest today is a Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, a record producer, author, and actor whose song Copperhead Road is still a jukebox favorite 33 years after it made Steve Earle a superstar. These days, he lives in New York City where he makes music and works in theater. At the time of the pandemic, he was working on a show called Coal Country off-Broadway, a musical based on the Upper Big Branch mine explosion in West Virginia that killed 29 men and tore a hole in the lives of countless others. He wrote the music for the show and appeared in it until it closed early when theaters were shut down for public safety concerns. 7 of the songs he wrote from that show form the basis of his new record, Ghosts of West Virginia. From Tennessee, via Zoom, Steve Earle talks about bridging the political gap, going to Walmart, and how doing yoga helps center him in these anxious times. We began our talk with him describing the decision to leave New York City and decamp to his second home in Tennessee. Here's Steve Earle.
I left on March 19th. The play closed on the 12th when everything else did. My son's school closed on the 14th. My gym closed on the 16th, and I took off. That was it.
And since you've been there in Tennessee, have you noticed that people are social distancing? Are people wearing masks? Is everyone following the rules?
No, it just depends on where you go. It was interesting. I boycotted Walmart years ago, but I got a trampoline for my son shortly after we got here because he was impatient about the pool opening and it wasn't quite enough when we got here. And we were in line to get it open, but it still was going to be too cold. So just something for him to do. He's 10 and he has autism. And so I was just trying to find something for him to do here. So I bought him a trampoline, and somewhere in the process, me and a friend of mine that was helping me, we lost some parts, some hardware. So the only place open that I could get the hardware that I needed was Walmart. So I went into a Walmart for the first time in forever. And I had been to the grocery stores and everyone had been wearing masks. I'd been other places in Tennessee and everyone had been wearing masks. I went into Walmart and no one was wearing a mask. And it's just this Walmart out where I am in Williamson County, Tennessee. This is sort of the trashy corner of Williamson County. Williamson County is the largest county in the state, and it may be the most affluent county in the state actually, but because Franklin's in Williamson County. I don't live in that part of Williamson County. The part I live in is a place called Fairview, and it's starting to, a lot of people moving here, and it's becoming more diverse and a lot different was when I bought this house in 1988. This house, my business manager refers to it as the Alamo. It seems to be divorce proof. It survived 6 divorces and I still own it. So it's like, I don't know how I just spent more time here than I have in the last 15 years since I moved to New York. And literally way more because I'm usually here Thanksgiving for 4 days, 5 days, Christmas for 5 or 6 days, sometimes a week. Mm-hmm. And then we go to Maui and then back to New York. And then I'm here at the beginning of tours to rehearse. And in the last 2 cycles, the way I've done that is I only summer. So that's, beginning of the tour, like in May sometime. And I would have been here. I would have come here to rehearse. And my son comes here to spend the summer with his mother in May anyway and stays with her till September. So I'm going to stay. I'm going to New York for the first time, I think, in a couple of weeks. And I'll probably base out of here till September when he goes back to school. I'm pretty sure schools will be open by then. And he needs to be in the school he's in, because he kind of, I worry about him losing ground if he's not in the routine that he's used to in school. It's just an autism thing.
I wonder what New York will look like when you go back. I know I've sat next to you on a couple of occasions at the Washington Street Diner in the West Village. And I just looked it up online today and their website's down. And
that's interesting. They might have died, those businesses, there's 2 that have been there forever in that neighborhood, you know, Waverly and Washington Square. Washington Square happens to be closest to my apartment. I've always lived, I lived closer to Waverly at one point. I lived on Jones Street the first like 5 years I was in New York. When I was on that I ate at Waverly when I was on that side of 6th Avenue. That's the way New York is. It's microcosm neighborhoods, you know. I go to the deli. My deli changed when I moved across 6th Avenue, you know, the one I went to every day. The whole bit, they're self-contained neighborhoods. Takes money to get me above 14th Street when I'm in New York. It's one of those things. I'm a downtown guy. But it's, you know, I hope we don't lose too much. That's, you know, that's one of the old like school Greek-owned delis, you know, that, and it's, you know, they're kind of hanging by the edge of their teeth anyway, a lot of them. And, you know, the menus are huge and you know, they don't, you know, I don't eat there a lot because most of what I would eat there, you know, I cook at home just because I got a little boy and it's just sort of, and I don't eat breakfast much anymore. So it just lifestyle changes over the years that I've been in New York 15 years now. It's hard to believe, but you know, some things have changed about the way that I, you know, that I eat and how I live since then, since I got to New York.
Well, are you still doing yoga every morning?
Yeah, 6 days a week. It's a Ashtanga practice. There's a Sabbath on Saturdays, so I don't practice Saturdays. It's a prayer and meditation system more than a physical exercise system for me, but it does, you know, end up being pretty good exercise too. I still get on an elliptical machine for an hour every day, and I get on the trampoline, and John Henry thinks it's hilarious, but I get on the trampoline and do about, you know, like 3 sets of about 20 bounces, which is about, you know, it kicks your ass.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to do there is make up for when I'm in New York. I walk 6 to 8 miles a day. I figured out. Plus, I live in the 4th floor walk up, so I've got a calorie burn that's missing since I came here, and I've lost like 46 pounds since last August, and I'm trying to keep it off. And it was mainly by changing the way that I eat, but I increased the exercise too, and I want to stay on that.
Do you think that the yoga has helped reduce any anxiety that you might be feeling during the pandemic?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because look, I did music for a Richard Maxwell play season before last. So that was 2 months. I had to be in the city limits of New York for that play, much to my managers and my accountant's chagrin, because I had to stay there, you know, to rehearse, and the play was up, and it's an off-Broadway play. It ran for 2 months like they do normally. And the same thing with this play. I just spent the longest period of time in the city limits of one municipality that I had since I was locked up in 1994. So I'm used to traveling, and so pretty easy for me to go batshit here. I had some bad things happen to me in this house. You know, I almost died in this house, you know, several times. And
from drug use?
I spent a Christmas that I completely lost Christmas Day detoxing in this house alone. It doesn't bum me out to come here, but it's not, you know, I don't live here on purpose. It's a house that I own in Tennessee as a property to hold on to. While I have to work here, I like having it. It's also where the majority of my guitar collection is, because there's not room for 140 guitars in my apartment. I had a house in Woodstock and the collection was closer, but that went away in the divorce, and I've still got this place. So this is where the guitars are. And, you know, the shocking thing to me, I moved to New York to do music for theater. I moved to New York to breathe the same air as Tony Kushner. And that means, and creatively and culturally, I moved there for the culture. I needed the input. I needed to be, you know, everybody's talking about everybody leaving New York. I hope a lot of those fuckers that are driving the rent up, you know, leave New York, and then artists will be able to afford to live there again. You know, my rent's a lot of money, you know, and I'm a renter. So I'll never be able to afford to buy a place in New York. And it's just, and I don't care. I'm okay with renting. I like not having to fix shit when it breaks, and my landlady loves me. So I'm kind of lucky in that respect. So it's not. It's just I live there on purpose, and I miss it a lot. But the first thing that vanished was the culture. You know, all the reasons for living in New York were gone within 48 hours. You know. I don't give a fuck whether the shops in the Hudson Yards are open because I've never been there. It's one of those things. But I work out at Dappolito, and that was the last thing. The private gyms closed before that, but I figured out a few years ago. Number one, I needed a pool for John Henry. He loves water, and none of the private gyms had pools. And it's like, and plus I figured out as a senior, I could belong to every pool and every gym in New York City for $25 a year, and I was paying like $800 a year, and I thought that's money. That's like a really nice guitar after like 3 years, So it's one of those things. So I started in Dappolito's. I like working out there, all those scenes in Raging Bull were shot there, and it's literally 5 minutes walk from my apartment. So that's my home gym, and the Chelsea gym, because John Henry's school is a block away from the Chelsea gym. So I work out both places.
And Electric Ladyland, where you recorded this album, is
my neighborhood
around the corner.
Recording studio. It's my neighborhood recording studio. I made Washington Square Serenade there. The first time I was there and realized that it still existed was I went in to play banjo on a Patti Smith record right after I moved to New York. And I just, it's where I made Washington Square there. I've done several things, singles, and stuff there since. And I'll probably be recording there for as long as it exists in someplace in New York for the rest of my life, simply because the custody arrangement and the way we're taking care of John Henry now. I'm in New York 9 months of the year concentrating on theater music, and then I tour the whole summer. So the only time a record can get made is during that period of time that I'm in New York. So I'm going to have to record in New York from here on out.
I've never been in that studio. I've knocked on the door. I've tried to get in. They won't let me in. But I just feel like there's a vibe in that room because Jimi Hendrix created it. Patti Smith, the Rolling Stones, everyone's recorded there. Do you feel that, or am I being a little?
No, it's haunted as hell. It's in the basement. The original studio itself, studios A and B, are downstairs. There are studios on the floors above. Right. It's interesting because it's this is how haunted it is. I did a thing for FUV there when Terraplane came out, the blues record. And there's a song on Terraplane called King of the Blues that's essentially the same changes as Hey Joe. And the whole story of Hey Joe is a Greenwich Village story where Hendrix ran across that song, and the guy that actually wrote it probably stole it in Greenwich Village. And it's not the guy that we thought wrote it for years didn't. He bought it, basically, is the story that I hear. But we were doing King of the Blues, and we'd never rehearsed it, we'd never played it. And, there's about 30 or some odd, contest winners there from FUV that were in the room, and it's not that big. The main room at Electric Lady's not that big. So they're there, we're set up on one side of the room, and I just kicked off Hey Joe when we got to the end of King of the Blues, and we played it. And it just came out of nowhere. And it was goosebumps all the way through it. None of us had ever played it together. I think all of us had played it at one point in our lives, at least me. Chris Masterson had, guitar player, and as far as the guys that age in the band, and Kelly Lenny was still with us in those days, and he definitely played it. And Will Rigby was the drummer still then. We'd all played Hey Joe before, so we got through it just fine. And it's become a regular part of our repertoire. Now the last, how long has that been? It's been 6 or 7 years.
Now let's talk about Ghosts of West Virginia. 7 of the songs were written for Coal Country, the show that closed in the wake of the pandemic. And it is a story about the Upper Big Branch coal explosion, killed 29 men. One of the worst mining disasters in U.S. history happened in West Virginia. Aside from, I assume that it wasn't just a writing for hire gig, that this means something to you. Why was it important for you to write these songs?
I was sitting around trying to figure out how to make a record that possibly spoke to, and if I did it right, for people that didn't necessarily vote the way that I did. I literally thought it was time to do that. I think we're in the trouble that we're in because of a lack of tolerance, and I think lefties are just as guilty of it as the right wing is. I'm a real life socialist. I don't have any trouble defining myself that way. You know, but I've never fooled myself into thinking this was anything other than a right of center country. It was born to be that, and it is. And if it's going to be democratic, then that has to include the viewpoints of people that didn't vote for the candidate I voted for. And we used to have, and this is the one superiority we have to parliamentary governments, is our truly independently elected executive branch. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world unless there's a military coup. And it used to be, my grandfather voted for Democrats and Republicans for president. And I suspect that was the only election that he voted in. And that's true of a lot of people. I wish it wasn't true, but it is true. So we say that people vote their pocketbooks, and that's not really what it is. They're voting their hearts. They're voting their families. They're voting life and death in their lives as they see it. And we have to understand about people. Like, for instance, I believe that coal's bad for the environment and petroleum's bad for the environment, but that doesn't mean shit in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And trying to understand anybody that doesn't understand why West Virginia went overwhelmingly for Trump is not trying very hard. And the idea that West Virginia, even there are West Virginians now that I've run into, I don't read reviews. I'm not on social media, but people unfortunately insist on making me aware of shit from time to time. And, there have been people that West Virginia's red, and that's not true. It's as purple as states get. They still got a Democratic senator. And the reason for that is unions. The reason for that is coal. So the idea is, what do New Yorkers have in common with West Virginians? This fell into my lap. Jessica and Eric came to me because they knew my music would lend itself to telling this story. I knew them because I was in the Exonerated as an actor twice, and actually produced some of the first readings of it as an activist, that did a lot of work against the death penalty. That's how I met them. But they knew that my music would lend itself to this story because stylistically, and I talk like this, so I would come in handy on a trip to West Virginia to interview these people. So it just fell into my lap. And it occurred to me that the epiphany was, oh, this is it. West Virginia is the canary in the coal mine. This is a great place. Now, this process, it's the beginning of a dialogue. This is chess. It's not checkers. And it's not, I don't, some big didactic political record. I've made the Preaching to the Choir record twice. And I'm not particularly didactic when I do that most of the time. I mean, there are some people that think I am, but if you go back and look at Copperhead Road's a pretty fucking political record. So's Guitar Town, and they're Reagan era, like in my mind, political records. I still write more songs about girls than I do anything else, but I don't, I'm not a political songwriter. I'm just a political person. And I was raised in an era when songwriters it never occurred to me that you didn't write about topics, So that's what it is. And this fell into my lap, and this was exactly the record that I wanted to make. And I'm really proud of it.
It's About Blood is so powerful on the album, Ghosts of West Virginia, because you take the time to mention the name of every man who lost their lives in there. And there are some people that have the same last name. I assume they are father and son, maybe father and grandfather, whatever it might be. But it's very powerful.
Thank you. The first verse of that song is largely about a guy named Tommy Davis, and he was the guy that you saw on Good Morning America with the ball cap that was talking to the cameras. He was the most vocal guy. He was really angry. 5 members of his family, including him, were working there that day, and 3 of them died. He lost his brother, his son, and his nephew. So he was angry. The names, I wrote the song And I had it finished, and it was sort of halfway through the workshopping process. And I got reminded because I was in DC with some people doing these concerts for the Women's Refugee Commission that Emmylou Harris and I've been doing, which are the people that are getting into these camps along the southern border, among other places. And so we've been doing benefits for them for the last few years. But the person that organized the concerts, Gail Griffith, she and I had worked together with Vietnam Veterans Foundation years ago on the landmine concerts with Emmy as well. And just for some reason, being in the company of those people and being in DC, it popped into my head the first time that I went and saw the Vietnam Memorial. And I saw it with Vietnam vets when I saw it. I saw it with Bobby Mueller and John Terzano, who ran BVAF for years. And I knew intellectually that those were names. But when you start walking towards that wall, the first time you get close enough, whatever your eyesight is, that you can read one of those names, it stops you in your fucking tracks because you realize they're all names. And that's really kind of what I was going for, was that effect. It was a way to, it's humanizing it. I learned a long time ago that this job is about empathy. And the best way to get a difficult idea across is people don't give a fuck what happened to me. They care about what happened to me that they can relate to. So Johnny Cash came up to me when Guitar Town was out. I'd met him a few times, but came all the way across the room at a fundraiser we were playing, and he said, "I really like that song, Little Rock and Roller." And I was just, it blew my mind that Johnny Cash even knew one of my songs. And I just went on with my chest all puffed up. And then a few days later, I was in a truck stop, and a truck driver walked up to me and said, "I really like that song, Little Rock and Roller." And the light went off. What do me, who wrote the song, Johnny Cash, and the truck driver have in common? We got kids, and we miss our kids when we're gone. So that was one of the first. I've been doing it. I had learned to do it because I learned from Guy Clark and other people by osmosis. But that was the first time I became conscious of the fact that this job is about empathy. That's what makes it work. That's how you're able to tell really complicated stories in 3 or 4 minutes. That's how you're able to get ideas across it that are unpopular. And possibly, I've had 3 people over the years, and then keep in mind, not everybody has access to walk up and talk to me or the opportunity to do that. I've had 3 people come up to me and say, "Something you wrote changed my mind about the death penalty." So you can't tell me that music can't change the world, because I have experience of that in my life.
And I do believe in music as a form of empathy. And I do think that the stories that people are interested in hearing about are stories about other people. The first job that I ever got fired from was a radio gig, and I was going way too heavy on all the facts and figures about the bands and data. And I got called into the office, and my program director said, "You got the voice, you understand the music, but nobody cares about how many hit singles the Rolling Stones have had. People want to hear about people." And that is a lesson that I've taken with me throughout my entire career.
Yeah.
I always am only interested in the personal story.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things. I mean, you have to be more careful than ever in my job, because we used to make records for girls. Now we make them for nerds. And that's where, I get caught up in the minutia of what is interesting to me, just like you were talking about. I've become less impressed by that kind of stuff as I've gotten older and figured out what my job is. I play Copperhead Road every night, and everybody I met in West Virginia owned a copy of Copperhead Road at one point in their lives. So that gave me the ability to do this. They would talk to us partially because of that, and because they knew me. And it also, I think, because I gave me a responsibility to make this record and tell this story. I think it just, okay. I think if you've been through what I've been through and you're not dead, then you learn that, things have a purpose. You're here for a purpose. I believe that I was spared for something, and I'm no longer arrogant enough to believe that I'm going to know what it is when I do it. So I just sort of suit up and show up for everything. It's one of those deals.
Steve, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Congratulations on the album. I've been listening to it on repeat, and it grows with me every time. And every time I listen to it, I hear something new. I hear a line that really sticks out, or a little banjo flourish. Although I love that you call the banjo the great social distancing tool, but
Yeah,
it sounds fantastic
that's
on this record.
actually Joe Young, my understudy in Washington. I mean, in coal country. Actually, that's a line I stole from him. I have to give him credit for that.
Well, it's good stuff, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Don't hurt yourself on the trampoline.
No, I'm trying not to. I have a net around it, so it's one of those things.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
That was Steve Earle. His new album, Ghosts of West Virginia, a record that the magazine AllMusic said contains some of the most eloquent music he's written in 2 decades, is available wherever you buy fine music. My thanks to Steve Earle for spending some time with me today. Most of all, though, my thanks to you for watching. I'm Richard Crouse. Stay safe, stay happy, and we'll talk again soon.